Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 33 of ENS Interviews. I'm welcomed by special guest, Alisha. How are you doing today, Alisha? Thank you for joining.
Hey, Evan, I'm doing really well. How are you?
Doing great. And I also wanted to say that Mike Demaray said to say hi to you, so had to throw that in there.
Cool. I saw that you had a really busy day today.
Yep. Very happy to do it, though. Super glad to have both of you guys on. Thank you so much for taking the time. I'll get, right started. I want to be appreciative of your time. So to start, how did you get into ENS?
So ENS specifically, I think it was in like January, February of 21, after the December 2020 bull run that Bitcoin went on, that I kind of came back into the space and more focused on Ethereum. Basically, I kind of started talking about crypto to my husband, and he sent me a bunch of email links, like maybe check these out if you're thinking about how to, learn more about crypto. And one of those links was to ENS. And I happened to go on to the ENS manager just like on a random day where Alisha.eth happened to come out of grace period and was on a temporary premium. And I know it's insane. It feels a bit like fated when, it's kind of crazy to think that my first name.eth was like available. Well, yeah. So it's coming down in that time. In 2021, temporary premium started at 2,000 US dollars and went down to $5 for a 5 character name. And so I watched it from the beginning, and it basically got to like $500 or $600. And every day my husband would be like, "You are going to regret this so much if you do not pull the trigger." He's just like, there's like no way you will live this down. It'll haunt you forever. And I was just like, okay. So I think it got to like $500 or $600 and I pulled the trigger. I registered the name. And, um, and actually, the first thing I did was I changed my Twitter name to Alisha.eth. And that was because I, I just felt like it was kind of an identity in itself. And I really liked that. And I wasn't really sure who I was on Twitter. Like, I literally just used Twitter to follow Liverpool Football Club news. And so that was kind of really my first kind of foray into being a person on Twitter. And I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have done it without having my ENS name. And then I started a podcast, just like talking to people in Web3. One of the people I spoke to was Nick. I ended up starting as community lead for ENS Labs, and then found out we were going to launch a DAO. And then basically from like November onwards, like November 2021 onwards, I kind of live and breathe and sleep the DAO. And it's brought us to today.
Yeah, that's awesome, and congrats on the first name. That's very cool. I'm definitely jealous of that. But anyways, so I know one of the questions we have is, why is a DAO needed? Like, what's the point of having a DAO?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to ENS specifically. I think it's such a broad, wide open topic when we're thinking about like why projects and protocols or communities need DAOs and what a DAO is in that particular context. Because just like um, like a company or a collective, there can be lots of different kind of variations of that single thing. So for ENS, it is a public good. And I say that first because it's really so foundational for what ENS is as a protocol. But ever since it was created, it has always been a public good, and that was the intention. And all of the decision making related to the protocol was made by a 7 keyholder multisig. And Nick.eth, who's the founder of ENS, was only ever one of those key holders. The other 6 key holders were people from throughout kind of like the crypto ecosystem. And so that in itself is kind of like an interesting point, because right from the beginning, it wasn't just like this, Nick and his team making decisions about the protocol. From the very beginning, actually, just decision making related to ENS was decentralized. Sure, it was only decentralized to like 7 people, but that's a lot more than most companies. When a lot of projects kind of talk about progressive decentralization, they generally mean starting with like centralized decision making within a company and then decentralizing to, say, community or token holder governance and things like that. But ENS started with decentralized governance. And so when we launched the DAO in November 2021, the logic there was that we were just further decentralizing the decision making related to the protocol. And so we essentially went from 7 key holders to, over 100, I think maybe over 100,000 people claimed the ENS airdrop, and currently there are over 60,000 active wallets that delegate ENS. So, and then they delegate their ENS tokens to maybe like hundreds of delegates who participate in governance. So that the reason for launching a DAO for ENS was to further decentralize the governance around the protocol. And the team felt like at that point there was kind of enough of like a repository of knowledge around best working practices for DAOs for that to be like the right time. I think it also is just like really coincidental. I think the DAO launched actually like the day before or after like the highest Ethereum price ever. So the timing was, I don't know if people in the room were there, but like it was very, very, everything was very hyped. But yeah, so I would say there are two functions of the ENS DAO. One is protocol governance, and two is to distribute the treasury and manage the treasury.
Yeah, well, thank you for answering that. And it's always been nice, like seeing that, like from day one. I think ENS has had that long-term decentralized vision. I think another thing that's great to bring up is that ENS never took on VC funding. I think that's one thing that's also very much helped with the protocol becoming decentralized over time. And so yeah, I really appreciate you explaining that. And so one more question, I guess, regarding this before we go into the deep topics is, what is your role as the governance lead of the ENS Labs?
Yeah, so I guess the way that I think about my role as governance lead is that when, just like what you said in terms of this long-term view of ENS and the DAO, when we think about ENS, and I think it's just a solid baseline to just think in terms of decades. So there's like 50 years or 100 years, whatever it is. And thinking about like getting this vehicle or mechanism, which is the DAO, up and running and functioning basically in its like first iteration, that's what I see as my job, to kind of assist wherever possible to create and build out the infrastructure, to set precedents with whether it's like with governance proposals or how we run elections, whether there are working groups at all of these sorts of things, which you kind of need a version 1 of. And the idea is that hopefully in a few years, the DAO will be able to kind of operate on its own, doing all these things, and they will have learned enough lessons from, the past couple of years on how these ideas go from just being an idea to an experiment to implemented to a precedent, all these sorts of things. And so, yeah, basically my job is just to kind of stand the DAO up and get it working on its own and do everything I can to kind of support people in the community to do the things that they're best placed to do to further the mission of ENS.
Yeah, awesome. And so I guess my next question would be, so what are some of the distinct roles available within the DAO for individuals, and how are these roles typically allocated in terms of times and responsibilities?
Yeah, I have a very strong view about, I guess, like membership of the ENS DAO, which is kind of different to how a lot of people think about DAO membership within, especially the Ethereum ecosystem. So, in the way that I define things, if to be a member of the ENS DAO, you need to be a token holder who delegates votes. If you have delegated ENS tokens, either to yourself or to someone else, then, in my opinion, you're a member of the ENS DAO. Because the DAO itself is simply just delegated token holders voting on proposals. That's what the DAO is. And then, so if you imagine like a almost like a solar system, where the DAO is like the sun. I'm kind of winging this analogy, so I don't know if it'll work out. But and then you have these different either companies or collectives or organizations that are funded by the DAO, and or like environments, and they are not the DAO, but they are very related to the DAO, obviously, because they're funded by the DAO. So an example of this is ENS Labs. So I, Alicia, am a contractor of ENS Labs, which is a Singaporean incorporated nonprofit company. And ENS Labs is funded by the DAO with a daily stream. Okay, so that's like one entity. It's like one way to say, I would say like work on ENS. Another one, and this is kind of like the only other one there is we have working group, and effectively like the only roles within those working groups are stewards. There's also a secretary, like a working group secretary, but in terms of, I would say like contributors, this idea of like having contributors who are members and things like that, it's not really how ENS works with the DAO or the working groups. I consider just like anyone who is a user of ENS, the ENS community. And I think that anyone like building to, improve or grow ENS or ENS adoption is part of the ecosystem. And I think that thinking about DAO membership as this thing that is separate from those two aspects of ENS really doesn't do a service to the protocol in itself, because it basically gives the DAO an identity in like of its own, when we should only be thinking about the DAO in its capacity to serve the protocol. So basically, like stewards, for each working group, there are 3 stewards in each of the 3 working groups, which are meta governance, ENS ecosystem, and public goods. And then there are kind of pods, which are basically determined like at the start of each term by stewards. There might be lead signers on those pods who are stewards or other people from the community or from ENS Labs. And then basically the money just goes out and people are funded. That's how the work happens.
Yeah, great explanation. And I think that's a really good way of putting it. There is all these different things that resolve around, what the protocol can provide. And so I think it's a great point that you made. And so I guess my next question would be, can you provide, like a comprehensive summary of, the different diverse working groups within the DAO, maybe explaining, their detailed specific functions and roles, and like what is it that they fulfill within this ecosystem? Sorry, did you hear that?
Oh, sorry, I must have accidentally muted myself. So now we're going into the 4th term for ENS working groups. And the way that they kind of came about is just that there is still so much capacity to do so much work, really, beyond the scope of what ENS Labs is currently doing. And working groups are a great way, in my opinion, to kind of create discrete groups of people who are interested in pursuing these like different mandates, and those mandates are essentially sourced from the ENS DAO constitution. So I think, let me actually just check. So I'm just actually going to basics.ensdao.org. But so Article 3 says income funds, ENS, and other public goods. And it basically says like any income generated to the ENS treasury is first used to ensure the long-term viability of ENS and continued development and improvement of the ENS system. And then funds not reasonably used to achieve this can be used to fund other public goods in Web3. And so automatically, you probably just heard there are 2 working groups, ENS ecosystem and public goods. And then the third one, meta governance, is basically just because I don't think you can have a DAO without having a meta governance kind of working group of sorts, whose job is to manage kind of the administration and operations of the working group and potentially of the DAO itself.
Yeah, well, thank you for explaining that. And so, could you explain, so for people who don't know, we do have an upcoming steward election. So could you explain maybe like the time frame for these nominations and voting windows? And then also, furthermore, like what is the established governance process for electing stewards?
Yeah, so basically since the working group proposal was put forward in December 2021, there was it was kind of repealed and replaced in July-ish 2022, and that was with EP 1.8, I want to say. And basically, EP 1.8 sets out the current working group rules, and the current working group rules cover everything, like every single detail related to the working groups. So, like what the purpose of them is, that there are stewards, the roles and responsibilities, elections, nominations, the secretary, compensation, like hopefully everything. And so basically, there are 2 terms for in each year. So Q1, Q2, and then Q3, Q4. So the second term is from the 1st of July, and that's what the upcoming election is for. And basically, there is now, actually, I just posted this in the forum. There is a call for nominations post in the forum, which is discuss.ens.domains. And anyone who is interested can put their name forward to be a steward of a working group. And something that is really important to me about ENS in general, and I guess which flows through to the DAO, which is that I feel like if I had to pick only 2 values that to me are the single most important things that we should always uphold related to ENS, they would be accessibility and transparency. And I think that this idea of accessibility is so important to me because when I came into kind of like the Ethereum ecosystem, I didn't, apart from my ENS name, I didn't really spend any money. It was around the time that the Gitcoin DAO launched, and I just missed it. So I came in and kind of heard about Gitcoin after they launched their token, which is, often the way in Web3, like hear about a project after it's had a snapshot for its airdrop. But I kind of said to myself, people say you can participate by contributing and like doing work and things like that. So I kind of tested it with Gitcoin, and I basically went from, being no one to being someone that held Twitter spaces and tried to kind of further proliferate this like public goods are good meme that Gitcoin had going. And that really inspired me to kind of carry that across to ENS. And basically I feel like you shouldn't need an ENS token. You shouldn't even need an ENS name. You really shouldn't need to have like a single qualifying aspect that you need to get over to participate as a steward, because I think that there are so many people in the ENS community. I think that the diversity that we have in our community is potentially like unmatched in Web3, and to kind of just like bring in all these barriers is, I think, how you kind of lose that diversity. And so, yeah, anyone can be a steward. And I think what's really, really interesting to note is that some protocols and projects, they have like effectively like protocol politicians who are like major delegates, but also like they're the people on the councils or like deciding who gets the money and stuff like that. And I'm really proud that with ENS, we have so many people who are, say, involved at a steward level, who are genuinely just like grassroots ENS community members who have just kind of like grown as, their role in the project as the project and the community has grown. And hopefully that will continue to be a trend with, the working groups in particular. So that was a long detail. Sorry, Evan. But I just feel like quite strongly about it. So anyone can be a steward. You basically have to write a statement in the forum and then create a snapshot vote and get 10,000 votes in favor of your nomination, basically to second your nomination. And while 10,000 votes can sound really daunting, if I just look up, so let me just quickly go to maybe ENS delegates page on Tally. And if I thought there was a leaderboard, maybe there isn't. So basically there are like, actually I wonder how many it is. Maybe I'll just try to go to, I really thought that Tally had a leaderboard so I could tell you like there are 50 delegates with over 10,000 ENS, so potentially 50 people that you could reach out to. but also, those votes can come from multiple people. So if there are, 5 people who have 2,000 ENS delegated to them, they could vote for you and second your nomination. So it's just like any way to get it to 10K. And honestly, if you have been in a Twitter space and you've spoken, and like people know that you're human, it's kind of like our version of civil resistance. Then I'm sure that there are, current stewards who would be happy to second nominations of people who are running. But yeah, and then there's basically only one question that you have to answer, which I think this term is like, why do you want to be a steward of this working group? I think that's it. And then there's like anything else you want to tell the delegates. But I think last term the question was, why would you be a good steward of this working group? But I feel like, I don't know if that's like a bit uncomfortable for people to answer. And I feel like, why do you want to do it? Hopefully we'll give people an opportunity to kind of just like speak to like a very personal motivation, as opposed to it feeling a little bit like a CV exhibition or anything like that. Oh, and so wait, the dates. So you can put like the forum post and the snapshot up now, but the nomination period is basically between June 6th and June 9th. And that's when you have to get like the 10,000 votes on your nomination by 9 a.m. UTC June 9th. And then the election starts on June 10th and runs for 5 days.
Awesome. And yeah, so I did pin up the discussion post that you added to the forum. So definitely everyone go check that out. And I really did appreciate the like how you and like the DAO views it, which is I think, by lowering the barriers of entry, you can have local knowledge and people who care the most about it and know the most about it, no matter how much capital they have, they can still enter and participate. And so I think that's awesome that people have the ability to participate no matter how many tokens they have. I think that's really important. So thank you for bringing that up. And then, so my next question is, what are some recommendations or insights you would offer individuals who are applying for small grants within the DAO? I think small grants are one of the most talked about grants, just because it's much more community driven in the sense that anyone who's building something small, or at least building something that's feasible by a person or two, has the chance of winning these small grants. And so I think there's definitely been a lot of like questions and like, what are the best practices in order to have a chance? So we'd love to just hear any recommendations you have when it comes to small grants.
Yeah, I mean, my recommendations are based on how I, as a voter, go through a page and the things that I do. So hold on, let me just like pull up ensgrants.xyz. So voting is open now and it ends in 3 days. I haven't voted for this round yet, but okay. So the first thing I do is normally is actually sort by votes, just because this is useful to me. It doesn't really like have a huge impact on how I distribute, say, my votes, but I think it's just like lightening the cognitive load of seeing people that you're probably familiar with as repeat participants at the start. And so you can kind of like knock them off and you're like, cool, Prem, I see unruggable subname rentals. I already have context for that. And so then I keep moving. When I get to something that I maybe have not seen, oh, cool, there's like a visit website. I know that Greg was making some changes to the small grant site. And so, yeah, so now there's like a website link. If you've put in a website, I would always click on that. And if you've got screenshots, I think that is really, really useful. Even if it's like a proposal for something that you haven't built yet, but you want to build, if you have like mock-ups or wireframes or like a Figma or anything like that, that's really useful. And I always click on like a Twitter link if there's a Twitter link. If there isn't a Twitter link, I'll just like go Google the .eth name of the person that submitted the grant. This sounds a bit, I don't know if this sounds too crazy. And try to find them. And then I will just like kind of do like a quick check to see if they look like they like genuinely are trying to build this thing, or if they've like ever talked about it or anything like that. And then kind of all other things being equal, I guess I consider like the potential impact of something like this, how likely it is to be used, how desperately it's needed, whether it's likely to have other sources of funding, and whether like the small grants program might just be a really great way to onboard this particular builder or project to a larger grant down the line. Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for that feedback. And I think, that type of stuff's really, helpful. And I'm going to hopefully send a lot of people to this space because I think, people just want an understanding of like what is, going to potentially get them a chance. And so I think, that's obviously like the first step of a proposal is, one, you're creating or, you're doing some sort of service or product. But then outside of that, being able to provide a good proposal so that individuals have a chance of voting on you. So really appreciate that. And I guess so, we have covered this last question a bit, but, more people have tuned in. And I think it's always great to just, keep going over it is like, what are some of the different ways that individuals can participate and or contribute to the DAO?
Yeah, so I guess like I wouldn't think about it as contributing to the DAO. I would just think about the kind of the best way to think about it is to think about serving ENS, like the protocol and the community. And then the DAO is really just like the mechanism through which hopefully you're empowered to do that. And so, yeah, I think just like whether you're technical or non-technical is obviously like a really big distinction. I would say if you are technical, just like building tools that you need. I think people like obviously Greg Skrill, Steve, who is building Opti names and has also done like ENS bots in the past and things like that. It's just like constantly building things. I think builders like that are so valuable in the ENS community because if you have the capability, I think there are, a decent number of people who would support you if you kind of got anything out and shipped. And I think, creating momentum is a really big part of, I guess, just like continued motivation to keep building in this space. And it's really nice, I think, for technical builders when you build something and you can see that people like it. Actually, I see Hidayeth in the space, and I just saw, like Drea's tweet about her 1W3 site that she just put up. And it's that kind of, I don't know, that's kind of like the life cycle that you want to see, which is like people building stuff and then people in the community using it. And so and then ultimately like growing ENS adoption and things like that. I think for non-technical people in the ENS community, just like finding ways to, I would say, just like be human, which I think the ENS community does pretty well. But just like engaging on Twitter, or if you feel comfortable coming to a working group call, and discussing different things, creating content for yourself. I feel like for me, blog posts are something that I don't, really put out that often. And I don't think I've ever actually done an ENS related one. I've done like public goods ones, but just like based on that experience of spending a decent amount of time writing something and then having it out there and discoverable on Google forever, is one of, I think, like the highest ROI things you can do as a non-technical person. And I think that's like one of the reasons why, like the ENS newsletter, which, Daylon, I can see Daylon in the space. I don't know if Marcus is in the space as well, but I think that, the newsletter does really well month in and month out in the grants and the small grants because it is so valuable to just like have that like written account or archive of what's going on. And I also think there's never too many people talking about the same thing because especially if you can, put your own interpretation or your own lens on it, how you explain something won't be how I explain something. And I'm sure there are, people in between that that are worth onboarding to ENS or worth, deepening their understanding of it. So yeah, I think content creation is just like a really big part of being non-technical and in the community as well, which obviously even
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for adding those inputs, and I completely agree. Yeah, I'm not technical myself, but I'm definitely trying to day by day contribute as much as I can to the protocol and just, furthering, getting the name out there. I think that's what's important. I think, the way I describe it is ENS sells itself, but it still has to be said in order for it to sell. So if people just hear about it and they start experimenting with it, I think that's all the better. And so I love that you brought up the blogs. I'm actually launching articles on my .eth.limo. And so I don't know, I'm going to keep trying to do my thing. And I also highly recommend, like Alisha said, going to some of like the working group calls and whatnot. I'm going to actually start doing that myself. I'm trying to do everything I can to just keep getting better. And, there's definitely more things for me to do. And I think we should all be trying to, get on the forums and get on these working calls more. And so I'm going to personally make that an effort. So thank you for giving us all that feedback. It means a lot.
Yeah, I would also say, like, when it comes to contribution in general, this is just like a way that I live. And it, I think, has served me, which is that I'm really selfish in my contributions. So when I do something, I have like no expectation that I will receive anything in return. And the reason that I'm doing it is to kind of further my own growth and learning and things like that, and to upskill myself. And that is like kind of like the process or the work is the reward in itself. And if anything comes of it, that's great. But I really don't kind of, it's not why I'm doing it. And even if that means that, you know, I say with, actually, while I was contributing to Gitcoin, for a little while, I was a steward at Kernel, which is like this Web3 learning community. And so I was like contributing at Gitcoin with no expectation, but then like getting paid as a steward at Kernel to help run this Web3 learning community. And that just allowed me to kind of contribute at Gitcoin without any expectation, which was really great. And I think it gets really tough, like just probably everywhere, but generally in Web3, when you kind of think about how early and how new all of these systems and this infrastructure, especially this like capital allocation infrastructure, how yeah, just like how new it is and how it's still really developing. Like even our working groups, we just put up like grant submission forms in the last couple of weeks for two of the working groups, but that didn't exist before. It was just like on the forum. So it's so developing. I think that not getting kind of like recognized financially for your contributions can be really tough. And but then just like also acknowledging that it's like probably not a reflection of you. It's just like a reflection of where this project and this protocol and this DAO is at this time and place. But as long as you're kind of doing stuff from like a really selfish place in a good way, then you'll just like keep doing it. And hopefully, you know, when everything is firing on all cylinders, you'll kind of get the recognition that you deserve and things like that. But it's just like something I think about because I don't know, Web3 can be, you know what it's like? It's like if you're like doing stuff for 1 month, it feels like you've been doing it for 6.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And so that's definitely like why I personally, and I think a lot of other people focus on what they're passionate about, focus on like what they believe is going to like change, a lot of the world and, make lives better. I think end of the day, Web3 really has a chance of bringing back more opportunities to individuals on the internet. That's why I'm passionate about it. And so really appreciate all that you've said on this. And one thing I do like want to bring up is like you said, all these systems are newer. We're constantly working on them. So I think everyone should, have that kind of mindset in their head. Like, look, we're not going to be perfect. DAOs are not perfect. Like, I think there's a lot of times that people give crap on ENS or any DAO, and I'm like, look, these things are new, and if you compare ENS DAO versus most DAOs, well, then you'd be very perplexed at like how bad some DAOs are. Like ENS really is doing a great thing. I think it's all a work in progress, like you said. So we definitely need to just keep doing our parts. And like you said, with the self-interest, I think, if we all do something, the ripple effect will occur. If I can help out one person, they help out one people. Eventually we can get 100 people on board. They can onboard 100 people. And it's kind of that sprawl effect. And that's what's kind of awesome about these digital autonomous organizations. It just takes time. So I think just having that kind of appreciation that this is a very difficult thing, it's a new thing, and that we're all trying to come together for the better of the world, the better the protocol. I think that's all great things to have in mind because it really is a difficult, nuanced area of the world. And so we have to, have some patience in believing that, we're trying to do good things and that assume that we should definitely assume that individuals are acting in good faith as long as we see that, in their work. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I do appreciate all the things labs and just the DAO members do. I think it's important.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually. Just this idea of, say, like the ENS DAO not being great at certain things and having lots of space for improvement. I think part of that is also potentially just around education. And so actually I should have pinned a DAO basics tweet. But basically like basics.ensdao.org is a site which explains everything to do with the ENS DAO and also kind of more broadly ENS to you in a way that I would tell you about it if I was texting you. So it should be really accessible. And but something else I just like pinned to the space is just this like recent research paper that came out about DAOs and kind of like the state of decentralization and participation of governance. And ENS is basically like top across the board. And I think that especially for people who like weren't here when the DAO launched, and it can feel really just like I almost feel like you just feel like gutted. It's like how I felt with like Gitcoin, which is like you're so excited and passionate about this project, and you like maybe came in a couple months after the DAO was launched or there was an airdrop and things like that. But I guess like in the scheme of things, the digit craze, which happened May 22, happened only like 6 months after the launch of the DAO, which is kind of insane. But when you think about it, like the DAO has only been around for a year and a half. So I think there's like still in that time scale of like, decades, there is still like some time which probably needs to pass before, things are experimented with say like token distribution again to like the community or to builders or to integration partners or things like that. But yeah, I think the other thing is just like if you have like no context for delegation and the fact that like ENS is a DAO that uses delegation, then you might look at ENS small grants and say, hey, this is whack. There are like, hold on, actually, let me go back. Let me go back to a price round and like tell you actual numbers. So like 2 months ago on like the second top project and ecosystem, there are 13 voters and like 10 of them with above kind of 2,000 votes. And you might think like, wait, all this money gets decided by 13 people? That's whack. But actually, those 13 people might represent 30,000 wallets. And that's what delegation is, and that's like the intention of it. So yeah, I think there are like all the information's there. It's just part of my job is also to like help disseminate this info. So I don't know, hopefully over the next couple of months, and I think that steward elections are like a great opportunity for like the working groups and the DAO to be kind of more top of mind for the ENS community, and I hope that will be the same round as well.
Yeah, and I think you make a great point earlier. Like, all this stuff is, we're thinking long term. That's supposed to be here for the next 10, 20, 50, 100 years. And so obviously not everything, is going to become fully as decentralized or autonomous as we like it from day one. But honestly, like you said,
I was actually saying that ENS has done actually like a really good job of being decentralized and autonomous compared to like basically every other DAO in Web3. But
no, I completely agree. I agree. I'm just saying, like, technically, if you're if you're a Bitcoin maxi, for example, whatever. I'm just saying, like, technically, some people have high standards. I'm just trying to make the point of, look, we're doing a great thing right now. Like you pinned up at the top, we have some of the best decentralization within all DAOs. So it is just like literally DAOs as a whole are new, and DAOs as a whole take time to decentralize. So things take time, people. The world wasn't built overnight. The digital world's not going to be built overnight. ENS won't be built overnight. But like you said, yeah, I think that like I'm proud to say that I'm a part of this community, and I think the DAO, like you said, is very well done compared to most DAOs. So props to all the people who help contribute and make it more decentralized, more autonomous over time. So yeah, I agree. Sorry if I didn't come off that way, but no, I'm very much impressed by how much is done in only a short amount of time. I mean, 2021, that 2 years ago or less, kind of crazy. So yeah, props to everyone. And I think like you said, education is really important. So just keep bringing these things up because it's really complicated subjects. They get lost in the Twitter timelines. It's hard to necessarily find all this information. So the more we talk about it, the more people who learn about this, the better. That's how I view it, at least. Um, but yeah, so no, I really am thankful for you taking this time. And again, everyone, just to let you know, there is a steward election coming up. So if you have any tokens, make sure to either delegate or vote. And I don't know, I think it's really cool that anyone can just contribute and or do their own thing. Anyone can create a Twitter space, anyone can create content, anyone can buy tokens and vote, anyone can build on it. And so I think it's really cool to just embrace being a part of this community and doing something. In Web 2 and Web 1, you can't just be a part of Google and contribute to Google. But with this, you are a part of the ENS community and you can do something. And I think that's really empowering. So I think it's awesome, what this whole community is about. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. Everyone should do their part and just, for your own interest, like you said, Alicia, for your own interest, because you enjoy it, because you want other people to see it, do it. So do it for yourself and do it because you think others will want it as well. So yeah, any last words though, Alicia? I really do appreciate you taking the time today.
No, I just posted a link to basics.ensdao.org, which I actually have to update because the protocol upgrades that got passed a couple of months ago now, I haven't updated the site since then. But generally, like the information is all correct and is like a really good context builder for anything related to the ENS DAO. And yeah, hopefully you will keep seeing me, creating more content and making the DAO even more accessible so the community can kind of participate in any way that they feel like they want to.
Yeah, that's awesome, and really appreciate all you do, and all the labs member and stewards and everyone who has a part in the ENS community means a lot to me. So thank you all for taking the time. Alicia, thank you for all the work you've done with ENS and for being here today. And I'm going to be sending people to this space because I think although there you can find these type of questions that I asked all across the internet, it's still great to have one dedicated place where people can just learn about the DAO even more. No matter how many times you read something, it's not a bad idea to read it again, learn more about it. So really appreciate it and keep up the great work. I know, the DAO is doing great things and can't wait to see how everything develops.
Awesome. Amazing. Thank you so much, Evan.
Yep. Thanks everyone for joining. This is episode 33 of ENS Interviews. Take care and I'll see you next Tuesday. Bye. Bye now.